Hello dear. Atheism and Islam. Seems like there is a common ground between the two. Atheism, it starts by its a doctrine of refusal. It's a doctrine of rejection. The first part of the confession in Islam, which is, as they call it in Arabic, Shahada, is also a rejection. The atheist says, no gods. I don't accept any God. In Islam, they say no gods as well. No gods mean la ilaha. That's la ilaha. So what pushes, or why the atheists? I'm talking about the sincere atheists. Usually these are philosophers, big thinkers, deeply thinkers. They realize that the emotions are subject to a sort of suffocation, compression, characterization from what? From the religion. From the organized religion. You should be more careful, not just the religion. It's man-made religion, not the primordial religion. They realize that everything is an idolatry. The religion itself became an idolatry. Religious people, they idolize and they iconize religion. Their circle comes back to the emotions. They become sort of like in a labyrinth or a maze. That's why they say, we don't accept that. So they reject, they say, no God. This is what the atheists, I'm talking about why I say it, sincere, because a lot of people, they try to follow philosophers to gain celebrity status. It's like, if I become an atheist, that means I'm a scientist. Usually it's science. Science is always taking you away from religion. This is how they find a sort of like a conflict, or I don't know, something about science and religion. In Islam, as I said, in the beginning, the first part of the Shahada, of the confession, is you reject God. The gods, I mean, any gods. What is the common ground between the two? The atheist fails to understand, after rejection all these gods, the fabricated gods by mankind, most of the time, all the religions, they were man-made. Is one a big person, whatever, they shape the religion. They make a religion with certain status, certain curriculum. That's what pushed them to reject the religions and to reject the deity, any type of deity. Deity, in other words, a God. In Islam is the same thing, but as I said, the thing that the atheists fail to understand, after rejecting all the gods, they stood with the self. They will see the world from the self. They ignore that. They say, no, we are open. You cannot. You cannot devoid from being subject to an observer. An observer, that's the self. The atheist, after rejecting all the gods, that's fine, that's good. It's something else, like in Islam. But the thing is, you cannot avoid from being subject to certain colorization, to certain shapes that you gained unconsciously from your environment. You cannot avoid from being subject to an observer. The observer himself will shape the emotions, and from your emotions, there is an analysis that you are subject to because of this, and because of this, and therefore, which implies you'll be characterized by these parameters. You cannot avoid from being subject from the subcortical region of the brain as an observer. The atheist, after rejecting everything, he's subject to the self. He is with the self. The way he sees the world, the way he analyzes the world from what he collected from his environment. Cannot be God. You are just a human being. You are collecting. You are collecting ideologies. You are collecting information. You are collecting habits. And then from all the accumulation of all of the above, it will give you certain, I should say, binoculars, a way you see the world. And that's how you see it from the perspective of the self. The self observing the self. That's why being sincere. A lot of suicidal states are coming from atheism. The person doesn't know, fails to understand that he is trying to prepare the self, preparing the self to be ideal, to be perfect. And if this self doesn't fulfill those instructions, which is the self with the self, idealism projected, and then I want you to be with the self. And then the person, like a self, is killing the self, which is the, suicidal state. Most of them, a lot of them, they kind of find perhaps safe haven in a lot of tranquilizers, drugs. Not necessarily like a drug that is for poor people. There is a drug for poor people. There is a drug for rich people. Today, all societies in the world, and I'm not smiling because I'm a spectator. I'm kind of like putting people, astaghfirullah. No. The thing is, we don't live the reality of life. We see the tightness. And that's what the tightness is. Going a little bit far, we're going to go to another subject. What is insomnia? I'm jumping to another thing. Insomnia, you can't sleep. We understand that, we know that. Insomnia is a mental spasm. We have to give an example of physical, concrete example in order for us to understand what is in a brain. When we say a physical muscle spasm is a muscle that is contracted against your will, and it is painful. You try to relax it. Man, I'm not contracting my muscle, my quadriceps in the leg or in my biceps, whatever, but it is contracted against my will. Insomnia is something is contracted against your will. You try to relax to sleep, you cannot sleep. If you try to sleep, you force yourself to sleep, you are only augmenting and making the severity, making the insomnia more severe than it is. Therefore, you have to jump to the chemo system. The chemo system is going to be drug that's going to relax the nerves, to relax the nerves. But this is what's going on. Anxiety is the same thing. The depression is the same thing. Melancholy is the same thing. It is this kind of like all we champion to create words in psychology, all coming from the compression. Person is claiming something. The person is kind of like claiming something, being with the self, and then as a repercussion, he will find himself with the mental spasm without realizing it. And he say, where is it from? Psychologists, they scratch the surface. They scratch the surface. They deal with the symptoms, and the symptom itself is false. When you deal with the false symptoms, the remedy will only make the situation worse than it is. Now, the Muslims. The first part in Islam, as you say ash-shahada, you say the confession. You say it is translated, there is no God except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. But I'm talking about the first part. Say, there is no God, same thing as the atheist. The danger in Islam, what is the danger? The Muslims say, when I say it, or I was born in a Muslim society, that's safe. It's safe haven. And again, God is on my side, and everyone else is kafir. That's how it is. I'm sorry for the term, everyone else is a kafir. Yeah, it's like God is on my side, and I'm going to give you proof of that. The Quran has never been modified. Do you see the logic of sophistry? In the science of logic, we study this. You give the first introduction, we call it in Arabic المقدمة الصغرى, and then you give the second introduction, then we say المقدمة الكبرى, and then we give the conclusion, which is النتيجة. Now when I say this person, Mr. X, he's a mathematician, he's genius in math. Mr. X is very polite, therefore he is honest. Look, the first, we can take math as a good science. We can take his behavior, he is very polite, we can understand. But the conclusion doesn't spawn, nothing spawned from the previous introductions. There's nothing to do with the previous introduction. It doesn't mean if a person is mathematician, polite, therefore he's honest. This is the logic of sophistry, is to give a logic, a logic with statements, with false, to play with the minds. And this is what actually, how they brainwash people. It's like you don't pay attention. It's subliminal. Subliminal is to affect the mind, why the person is like passive state. In a passive state, he's awake, but he's in a somnambulistic state. So what the Muslims say, by entering is Islam, therefore that's it. That's the biggest danger. He ignores the fact that he is subject to a colorization. He is subject to a shape. He is subject to a doctrine that he supposes, and he must eliminate all the time, that he ignores. Unfortunately, that's it. The person, when he gains, acquire, obtain an identity, he sees it very tightly and he shows off with it and he defies with it in the name of religion. He doesn't know that's the biggest danger of Islam. I said about the atheist, he is subject to a colorization as well. What do we mean by a colorization? Every color has its characteristics. The red is red, the blue is blue. But the transparency doesn't have a color. This is the role of the true, there is no God. If you want to come back to the Creator, to go to God, do not shape yourself in front of God. You remove these kind of effacement. I mean, you don't remove the effacement. You use the effacement and renunciation of every credit at the same moment. At the same moment of the alternative, who was the dominant impulse, who was the observer that you generated consciously and intentionally. We hear about people who converted to Islam. And you hear about sort of like very self-confidence. I'm not against, God forbid. Welcome, and it's very nice. That's something. First of all, the word convert is totally wrong. You know that. I mean, everybody, others, they say convert. It's like you say, I moved from France to the universe, or I moved from Australia to the universe. Well, Australia is in the universe. Islam is not anyone's religion. It's not even, the word is submission. It's not even a name of religion. The translation itself is false and kept going through the centuries. And you cannot now, I say, the religion of submission. It's a process rather than a word, rather than an identification or a nickname. It's a process. Anytime your unconscious is collecting identities, is collecting images, and spatially those images, this is how you see God. You go back, the process is a state of effacement, renunciation, to give through the worship. So this is the danger. The common ground is an atheist. He say no gods. Well, do you ignore the fact that you are subject to certain image? Do you ignore the fact that you are subject to certain doctrine that you collected? That's from that doctrine that is shaping you. This is how you see the universe. You give the universe, you measure the universe with the ruler. I'm talking about space. And you measure the eternity with the temporal, which is your mind. How can you measure the eternity with the temporal? When you say you see the world through the eyes of God, is by worship, not to be God. You hear the world through the ears of God. I'm not saying you become God. You worship what will take over. You see the world in its real state. Your perception and your perception with the naked eye, and your conception with analysis with your mind, and even with your sensation. Even your sensation is, you see it today with something, tomorrow you see it differently when when you deal with reality, when you absorb, when you go to the state of effacement and renunciation. As I said, you hear the word converting to Islam, and that's it. Actually, this is the beginning of the duty of conscience, where the Muslims ignore that. The Muslims, they live the same thing as the Jews and the Christians. The Jews created the platform, that's it. Christian created the platform, that's it. Muslims did the same thing. When in fact, reality is not that's it. You enter to the duty of conscience. That the conscience is not yours. The conscience is God's conscience. But God forbid, that's just a term, as we say in Arabic, al-majaz, just to give. We don't say refer the conscience to God. We refer to the soul. Same thing, Greeks, when they speak about animism, animatism, they refer that there is conscience in everywhere in the world, in the planets, and they refer it to the soul as well. They say there is a soul in the sea, there is a soul. That's why they deify those planets, Jupiter, the sea, Poseidon, Uranus, Athena, and keep going. I hope I didn't go far. Listen, it's always a pleasure. May God bless you, and see you soon.